Good afternoon, everyone. Carla, I must correct you there. There's an all team of ladies that know much more about this topic than I do. So unfortunately, I'm the least pretty face that you will see today when it comes to market access. It is a process, as you can see on that first slide, and I'm going to try and navigate you through how this process works today. But it's a maze that we deal with, within the industry, within the different divisions and fields of expertise in the industry, from plant pathology to entomology, and then a maze nationally, and then also a maze that we need to navigate country to country when it comes to protocols. So it's obvious, why do we need market access? We export around about 50% of apple and pear and stone fruit production. We produce too much for the local market to consume, and 90% of our production gets exported. It's a generator of 25 billion rand worth of income annually. And I think the most important part is the jobs that we create and the people that are dependent on us as producers, as exporters, as packhouses, as industry. So our growth depends on access. What we have witnessed over the last, say, 10 plus years is as I said, we produce more each year on all fruit types that we deal with, and we've seen a shift mainly towards the Middle East and the Far East in Asia. Africa is relatively stable, but 10 plus years we saw a lot of growth into Africa. But I think what is important, if you look at the percentage there, about 30% of apples in this example that goes to the Far East in Asia, and that's where most of our growth is taking place in terms of new markets. So although the percentage came down the last couple of years slightly on the Far East in Asia, if you look at the volume, you can see that it's an upward trend in terms of cartons, apples, again, just the example, over 14 million cartons of apples that we export to the Far East in Asia. So why does market access matter? We've heard a lot about increasing global barriers from logistics that we face internally as well as internationally, the pressure on the use of agrochemicals and MRLs and the tools that are available to us to deal with all these pests and diseases. I think we've heard enough about conflict and international geopolitics. And then this whole new book that was thrown at us with tariffs and non-tariff barriers. One that's recently featuring is the quotas for Indonesia that wasn't issued for pears, for an example. So there's a lot of barriers that we need to navigate. And then mostly more from retail side is the ethical and environmental requirements, which is important, of course, and then private retail certifications. It boils down to we need options and we need alternatives. The more markets we have, the better, of course. It was interesting, I had a look at my presentation of 4 years back, and this was the exact slide that I presented 4 years back in the wall up there. In the meantime, we were worried about Ukraine, Russia. I think Trump was just finishing, and we are still worried about China and Taiwan politics. But in the meantime, a couple of new faces came back and joined us. And the one there in the middle, Kim, is just sitting with his finger on the red button, waiting for somebody to pick a fight with him. Other regions, of the Middle East that came along. So things changed drastically in the last couple of years. And if you want to look at the positives of Trump version 2, there's a couple of positives that came out of that. I think Professor Gomede spoke about BRICS this morning, a new order emerging. We see the importance of BRICS growing. The conflict, of course, had negative impacts on tariffs, and it was disruptive and a big impact on us immediately. But there's also positive spin-offs that came out of this whole new world order that is emerging. All of a sudden, India wants to talk to us about tariffs. China has given us a 0% tariff. So there's new relationships, old ones as well, but they are evolving and growing at a rapid rate. So what is market access? It is the ability to export under agreed conditions. I'm going to feature today on the sanitary and phytosanitary issues. I think Wolf will talk about the tariffs and the other regulatory stuff. But it's important to distinguish between market access and the different facets. So a free trade agreement, a preferential trade agreement, or any form of trade agreement is not access. That refers to the tariff that we pay. Access speaks to the pests and diseases and the SPS requirements that we have to adhere to be able to export to that market. It's got different layers. It is a multi-year, multi-stakeholder process. If I can tell you how many times in the past people tell me, but just get on a plane and go talk to this person in China, and next week we send out cherries, for example, it's simply not that simple. It combines science, research, technical expertise, there's diplomacy involved, the minister is involved directly, politics, geopolitics, and then eventually compliance, and then, of course, commercial readiness. So market access is a strategic capability, not just a regulatory hurdle. At industry level, as I mentioned, the team of ladies, we've got the expertise, we've got the capacity, we've got the support. So most of the work gets done behind the scenes. We as Hordgro or as industry can't negotiate deals directly with other countries. It has to be government to government or National Plant Protection Organization to NPPO. So in essence, we work closely with the Department of Agriculture. We do a lot of the work. It's a joint effort, and then eventually it's government to government negotiations. There's also elements of lobbying and facilitation, so you can interpret that in any way, but there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes that's not technical of nature, but to grease the wheels and to get the things moving. But fundamentally, science and research and the levy that you as grower pay forms the foundation of market access and applications. What we often find is that there's capacity constraints, both on our side, talking as a country, but also from the importing or the target country. They have to deal with applications from all over the world for all different fruit types. So that's why it often takes so long to gain access to a new market. And traditionally, it was one fruit type at a time. As Minister said this morning, for the first time in history, China gave us access for all stone fruit types except for cherries, which we'll hopefully get later this year. Okay, so I've broken it down into 8 different steps or the process. I'm going to go through them quickly. I'm not going to read them now. I'll touch on each of them. So first of all, we have to look at a market, the demand, the pricing currently in that market, the seasonality, who's already exporting to that country, do we have the right product profile? A good example is table grapes that got access for Barlinka to Japan after 20 years, and nobody buys Barlinka anymore or even grows it anymore. So do we have the blue apple that South Korea needs, for instance? Otherwise, we're wasting our time trying to get access for that specific market. Also looking at the likely mitigation requirements, will the cold treatment, for instance, Mexico is a 40-plus day land-based cold treatment. Apples can handle it, plums will not be able to handle it. So you have to look at the commercial and compliance realities in terms of tariffs and treatments for the potential of that market. So what we do internally, we look at each fruit type. We do this every second year or so. This is, don't expect you to read it, just to show you that we look at dual temperature, single temperature, product size, sugar qualities, flesh color, everything. We go through all the products for all the different markets, and then we prioritize them. As you can see on the right-hand side there, China was the most important one for stone fruit. We cracked that one. We're busy with India with in-transit negotiations and trials. So for each fruit type, we go through this process internally. But we are not the only fruit industry in the country. So we are fighting with citrus and berries and table grapes and all the rest, also to get in line first for a specific country. This example again is for China. You can see that stone fruit was next in line there. We had a bit of a let's call it a tiff with blueberries a couple of years ago where they wanted to try and jump the queue. But luckily stone fruit is in now and cherries are on the verge of getting access to China. So it's an internal discussion and then also trying not to fight with the other fruit types for certain countries. So then we compile a phytosanitary information package by the industry experts, as thick as an old dictionary, stating all the pests and diseases that we know are currently in the country. And we send this to the Department of Agriculture and simultaneously ask them or request them to apply to a certain country for access to a target country. So DOA then sends this PIP plus the request, for instance, the latest one for apples to Brazil, and Brazil will then do a scientific assessment of the pest and the risks, pest risk analysis, and it's of course driven by the importing country with the sole idea not to import pests and diseases that they do not have. Normally it takes frustrating 2 to 10 years, but with the pressure recently, as I said earlier, with relationships internationally, it has gone much quicker. The Brazil one, almost in record time. I think it was less than a year since we applied. Okay, so then they do the pest risk assessment. On the left-hand side, that was towards the end of last year. We did a virtual cherry inspection or verification. On the right-hand side, can't remember, I think that's the Philippine one, or it's a physical one where the inspectors come to South Africa. They meet up with our team of experts, with the Department of Agriculture, with BPCB, and then, of course, most importantly, the growers and the pack houses. So they do a sample and inspect various pack houses and look at our system of risk management. So then it's back and forth between our experts via the Department of Agriculture to agree or disagree on certain pests that should be included and diseases or should be excluded from the protocol, and also what the protocol entails in terms of fumigation or in-transit cold treatment, land-based cold treatment, whatever the treatment is that country then requires. That was last year, October, so then the officialdom goes into a bilateral engagement or an agreement where a protocol is then agreed upon and Minister Steenhuisen signs it, and there we go, or not. Then we have to register all our orchards, packhouses, and treatment facilities for that specific market. It differs between different markets, different countries, but we have to prove packhouse as well as grower compliance, as well as a big element of traceability that is required. Luckily, through research that's been done through AgroScience and with our experts, we've developed a systems approach that we have in the back pocket for certain countries. For other countries, we already implement the systems approach combined to cold treatment and or fumigation. Irradiation is an option, but not really commercially used so far. It's a chicken and egg situation with irradiation, but not a preferred treatment method. Okay, then we bite our nails. We send the first trial shipment. Somebody steps up and takes the first risk. It arrives in the importing country, where we then have to show that we complied with the requirements in the protocol. Then as soon as it starts taking off, export starts scaling up. We link that to market development and consumer education, but I think the crucial part here is continuous compliance. We lost access to Taiwan now for a year and a half at least, and it has cost us hundreds of millions of rands. So continuous compliance and being serious about what is required is crucial in this whole process. I'm not going to go through all the steps. It's more or less the same as the 8 that I started off with, but just the case study for apples to China. The application was done in 2003, and only eventually in 2016, the protocol was signed in 2015, so 12, 13 years later, we only were able to export the first batch of apples to China. Recently, it's gone quicker, but it's normally or traditionally a very long process. So coming back to maintaining access, it requires audits at different levels. Are we complying? We get calls from the Department of Agriculture inspectors saying that they did the verification now. Grower X, Y, and Z are not complying and they are repeat offenders. Then we launch an audit into those guys and try and help them and get them on the right path and doing the right things. I've mentioned the risk management system as well as interception management, and rapid response is required here before we lose a market. So one of the concerns this season, this is rejections, a lot of monitoring that takes place. So we get a report every week per PUC, per region, where there are fruit fly or false codling moth interceptions. Again, if we see repeat offenders, if Marilise or Shelley comes knocking on your farm door, then you know you did something wrong. But you can see that 74% more fruit fly interceptions were on stone fruit this season compared to the previous one. So that immediately raises alarm bells in terms of how do we manage this pest specifically for Europe. And the irony is on FCM, 90% of it was on plums, but technically plums are not regulated for FCM in Europe. Okay, so yeah, it's a long process. I've mentioned the capacity limits on both sides in terms of the key constraints. It's becoming increasingly stringent on a SPS level globally, and you've heard about the previous speaker about all the changes in the EU as well. And then, of course, logistics, the practical implications, the commercial realities, and compliance challenges that are constraints in the process. Success factors, what do we need to do? We need to have a good industry-government relationship on various levels, from a technical level to a diplomatic level to a ministerial level. We need to align, and I think somebody else said that this morning. I think it was a minister. It's a joint effort. It's a joint operation. We have to work together to make this work between industry and government. Again, confirming scientific data, research, and capacity at that level is crucial. And that's where AgriScience and Vian and his team also comes in. We have to have a proactive strategy, seeing that it's such a long-term process. And then also government-to-government interaction and government-to-government relationships. We speculate that we are struggling to open up Taiwan again because of our relationship with China as a government and as a country. But we have to have a compliance culture and abide by that. So what does the future look like? It's unfortunately only going to get more difficult. The tariff and non-tariff barriers seem to jump around from today to tomorrow. But as I said earlier, there are some positive spin-offs of this global fallout with Trump. Pressure on the use of remedies and agrochemicals that we've heard about. And then also looking at what happened last week with the storms and the floods. Climate-driven pest risk concerns and pests and diseases changing their behavior and patterns as they adapt to a new climate. And then, of course, the traceability demands. So in closing, market access determines growth. It's as simple as that. It's collaboration and compliance, again, is critical. Market access not will become, it is a competitive differentiator, and countries that move faster will win market share. So we can only grow our export by entering new markets and taking market share from competitors and or growing demand in that market. But we've made really good progress lately, and I must say it's been the quickest that we've moved on many markets in my lifetime in this industry. So last one, color. Market access is a system, it's not an event. It requires years of investment. Compliance, compliance, compliance again determines its sustainability. Collaboration is non-negotiable. And the future growth of South Africa's fruit industry will be determined not by what we can grow, but because we can grow, we're one of the best growers in the world, but it's by where we can sell it. So we go by the grow ethos, which refers to gaining of new markets, retention of current markets, and then optimizing the markets that we do have access to. Thank you.